people that had done the original quiz, I'm going to put that one out of 0. So potentially in the grade book, it's going to show 0 out of 0, but that just means I'm not counting the old quiz. Only this updated quiz is going to go towards your grade. So just keep that in mind. If you have any questions, stay after class and we can talk about it together. But yeah, only this updated quiz is going to go towards your grade. So I apologize. Not going to happen again. The other thing I want to show you guys, I know last week there was just a lot going on, so I didn't want to bombard you with too much information. But this comes from AIPB, who's the publisher of your textbooks. So I just want to read this to you guys. So from AIPB, congratulations on taking this important step towards substantially improving your market value and your importance to your company or clients. In the back of each workbook is a final exam. If you pass the exam, you will receive a certificate of completion, suitable for framing to show your expertise in the area. I also recommend that should go on your resume. However, to become a certified bookkeeper, you must pass the 2-hour tests at your local Prometric test center and the 2 workbook final exams for inventory internal controls. So by just completing the final exams, you're going to get the certificate of completion. But to actually become a certified bookkeeper, there's also this process to keep in mind. So I just want to make sure that's very straightforward for everyone in here. I believe if you've taken other classes, possibly with Avo, he possibly went through this with you as well. So no certificate you receive from the school for taking this class is a substitute for passing the national certification exam. Best of luck to you. We hope to welcome you to the ranks of America's elite bookkeepers soon. Sincerely, the executive director. So just want to make sure that's super clear. The other thing I wanted to point out, again, another announcement. I believe there's a few people in here that are considering this CPA kind of public accounting path. Even if you are not, I highly recommend attending this networking event. It is on Thursday, September 8th from 12 to 1 in CC 130. Make sure you register. Even if you have no inclination towards, entering public accounting, I'm going to offer extra credit. There's going to be a sign-in sheet. I'm also going to be there. So as long as you come say hi to me, I'll write down your name. But again, you don't have to do this. I know a lot of people are work and they can't come in the middle of the day. No worries. But a great networking event, especially just to kind of get familiar with how networking works. It's a little bit different, especially if you haven't done it before. And the more times you practice, the easier, the less stressful it is. So maybe you're not even interested in public accounting. You can still use this experience in maybe networking in another industry that you're interested in later on. Those were the only announcements I wanted to go over. Any questions before we dive into section 3 and 4? We're good. Okay, awesome. And then also, just so you guys are aware, I did do another outline for 3 and 4. I got some feedback that students are liking that. It is linked for you guys. I'll show you where you can find it. Let's load. So yeah, I've linked the outline right here. And so what I recommend, again, you don't have to do this, but if you want to open this and then just make a copy for yourself, you can go ahead and take notes right on there. A lot of the information is already typed out for you. So I'm trying to save you guys time. I know a lot of you guys are working and it's a lot to work and take classes. So what I want to go through today is the PowerPoint for mastering payroll / that outline. We're going to kind of toggle back and forth again, similarly to how we did last class. And then really, I'm going to spend a chunk of time just on practice problems. I know last time we were a little bit rushed with like orientation and syllabus information. So keep that in mind. Oh, that reminds me. One other thing I want to point out to you guys. If this will load. I know you guys are, really busy. So just so you know, this 3rd, 4th column was added. So it tells you exactly which discussion and which quiz are due each week. So this next week, you have discussion 2 due Thursday. All of these assignments are due at 11:59 p.m. And then you have your second quiz due on Sunday. So just keep that in mind, trying to make everything very organized, very neat for you guys. So let's open up this PowerPoint, and we are going to start with slide 21. And if you want to open this up on your end, you're more than welcome to. If not, feel free to just follow along. So section 3 really dives into, what do we, let me open this up a little bit. Sorry. What activities count as work, right? It might seem like, oh, it's pretty straightforward. It's when you show up, you do your job, and then you leave. It's pretty straightforward. Not necessarily. So there are federal laws that specify the following as activities for which employees must be paid. They must be compensated. These activities count as work, right? It's time spent putting on or taking off clothing required by the employer, right? Potentially you work at maybe like a chemical plant and you have to, go through a whole cleaning before you get there and kind of like a rinse off after you leave. So you're not taking any of like those kind of dangerous particles with you. That time is considered work. Time required to be on call, either near the workplace or on the premises, and travel time during the employee's normally scheduled work hours. And we're going to dive into these. This is just kind of an overview. Right? So employees must be paid for hours of travel. Right? This includes from one work site to another during normal working hours. So, for example, my younger sister, she is a manager for hotels, and she manages the social media for probably 8 hotels in the Arizona area. She needs to be compensated for her travel from one hotel to the next. She is not compensated for her drive to the very first hotel, right? That's just a normal part of everyone has to commute to work. And she's not compensated for the very last hotel she visits to her home. But the inter-travel to the different hotels that she sees, that constitutes compensation. Also important, employees must be paid for hours of travel to a work site that is a significant distance from the employee's normal work site. So let's say potentially you're an auditor and your normal drive to the office, we'll just call it 15 miles. But now let's say you get on some client, you have to work for some client that's 50 miles away or 75 miles away, right? That's quite the commute. Even though that's the first place that you're going in the morning, if you have to travel a significant distance, you're going to be compensated for that. Employees need not be paid for time commuting to and from work. We kind of went over that, right? Everybody has to do that. Unless, here's the big unless, that if you learn anything in this class, or especially if you take a tax class, there are always exceptions. There are exceptions to the exceptions. So stay tuned for exceptions. So employee need not be paid for time commuting to and from work unless the employee is on 24-hour call and takes a company vehicle home to be able to respond to emergency calls. So I was talking about my younger sister earlier. My older sister, she works for a utility company. She does like their gas and energy. She's an engineer doing their gas and energy basically requirements. So once every 6 weeks, she has to take the company vehicle home and she's on call in case there are any emergencies. She is compensated for that. Okay. Employees must be paid travel time for overnight trips, but only for those hours of travel that are during the employee's normal working hours. So I think the example makes the most sense for this, but the days of the week are irrelevant. What matters is whether the hours of travel coincide with the employee's regular scheduled hours. So for example, Tyree works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, right? Typical job. If he travels on Monday from 6 to 8 p.m., he need not be paid for these 2 hours because they occurred after his normal stop time of 5. So it doesn't matter the days, it matters the hours, the time. Okay, Jan normally works 8 to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. To attend a seminar, she leaves home for the airport Monday at 12 p.m. and arrives at her hotel in another city at 8 p.m. How many travel hours must Jan be paid for? right? Her normal working hours are 8 to 5. But she leaves starting at 12 p.m. So she must be paid for travel time that occurs between 12 and 5 p.m. She does not have to be paid for her travel time past 5 p.m. because her normal hours stop at 5. Okay, Chen normally works 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday to Friday. He leaves home on a business trip Sunday at 5 a.m., arriving at the hotel at 11 a.m. The following Saturday, he leaves the hotel at 1 p.m. and arrives home at 6 p.m. So let's look at each day separately. Sunday, right? He arrives at the hotel at 11 a.m. Even though he left at 5, he's not going to get paid for those hour 5 and hour 6 a.m. He's only going to get paid 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., right? Those are his normal hours of work. What about on Saturday? 1 to 4. Even though he gets home at 6 p.m., his normal hours stop at 4 p.m. So he only gets paid for those 3 hours. Kind of some slight nuances, but these rules are really important. Especially think about there's some jobs where you're traveling all the time. Other jobs, these rules aren't going to come into play as much. Any questions on this travel time? So far, so good? Awesome. Okay, so let's jump down here. Premium pay for overtime. OT, you're always going to see that abbreviation. It means overtime. So FLSA requires at least 1.5 times employees' regular hourly pay rate for each hour actually worked over 40 hours for the work week. So how do we define work week? It's 7 consecutive days or 168 consecutive hours. It doesn't have to be Monday to Sunday, right? As long as the employer is using the same 7 days consistently. So what's excluded from this work week? Vacation, holiday, sick pay, right? These are hours, they're not actually worked. Your paid commuting time to and from work are not hours actually worked. So keep that in mind, especially we're going to jump to practice problems. I'm trying to go through this PowerPoint, not super quickly, but fairly quickly so we can just focus on practice problems. What's prohibited? Applying one work week's overtime hours to another work week to avoid paying overtime. Right, think about it. If you're an employer, right, and let's say your employee works 50 hours one week, but only 30 hours the next week. That employer might be like, well, let's just take those 10 extra hours from one week and put them into the other, then I don't have to pay overtime. That is not allowed. That's prohibited. It's unfair to the employee. They get overtime for those 10 extra hours that first week. There is some important exceptions. Always, there are some important exceptions. Healthcare and public sector, meaning like government employees, this rule does not apply to them. So how is a salaried employee's regular hourly rate of pay calculated? Well, if it's your annual pay, really the key thing here is you want to keep your rate the same, right? Annual pay, you're going to divide by the hours worked per year, right? That's what annual means, per year. Monthly, divide by hours worked per month. Weekly, divide by hours worked per week. Bi-weekly, hours worked per bi-weekly period. And again, we're going to go through some examples with this. I think we've got some coming up right here too. So premium pay for overtime. Let's look at some examples. Serge's son is getting married. So he arranges to work at the factory 48 hours this week and take off 1 day next week, right? He's basically shifting 8 hours from the wedding week to the week before. His regular hourly pay rate is $24. How much must he be paid for the week? So let's calculate his overtime pay rate. So we've got our regular rate times 1.5. So 24 times 1.5. His overtime pay rate is $36 an hour for those extra hours over 40. So for week 1, he worked 40 hours. That gets multiplied by that normal rate of $24. And for the amount above 40, he worked 8 hours. That gets multiplied by our overtime pay rate. And then we end up with his overall pay. For week 2, right? Remember, he took that Friday off or whatever day that was off for the wedding on the second week. he only gets paid those 32 hours times his normal pay rate. His employer is not allowed to apply those extra 8 hours to week 2. That's prohibited. It would be unfair to the employee. Let's look at this one. Marina's work week is Monday to Friday. She is out sick Monday and Tuesday, but is given 16 hours sick pay for the time, right? Traditionally, it's 8 hours a day, right? So she gets 8 hours for Monday, 8 hours for Tuesday. That's a total of 16 hours. To make up for this time, Marina works 36 hours Wednesday to Friday. If Marina's hourly pay rate is $20, how much must she be paid this week? So she has 16 hours of sick pay plus the 36 hours worked, right? This is from Monday and Tuesday. This is from Wednesday to Friday. That's a total of 52 hours. Multiply that by her normal hourly pay rate of 20. You might be asking, well, she worked, technically over 40 hours. Why is she not getting overtime? Those 16 hours, they're not actually worked. It's sick pay. Overtime doesn't come into play. Overtime only comes into play when we're working excess of 40 hours and actually working in excess of 40 hours. Okay, Joe was paid $500 for a 40-hour work week. This week, Joe works 50 hours. So he's overtime. What is Joe's overtime pay rate? What is her total pay for the week? So $500 for a 40-hour work week. And typically we assume that, 52 weeks in a year. So earns $26,000 per year. We're going to divide that by the number of hours worked in a year, right? 40 hours a week for 52 weeks. That's 2,080 hours a year. This gives us her hourly rate, right? They didn't give us the hourly rate on this one. We had to back into it. You're going to see some of these problems, I believe, either if not on the homework, you will see, I think, one on the quiz. So we have 26,000, that's our annual salary, divided by the number of hours we work in that year. That gives us our hourly rate. That hourly rate times the 1.5, right? We have an overtime rate of $18.75. So we have $500 for that 40-hour week. And then, hang on, I see your hand. 1 second, Lena, and then I'll call on you. And then, right, Joe works 50 hours. So that's 10 hours over the 40-hour requirement. That gets multiplied by our overtime rate for a total of 687.5. Yeah, Lena, go for it.
Yes, Professor. I am thinking another way that because $500 is the monthly pay and we have the 40-hour work week, the weekly pay. So we can use 500 divided by 40 to get the the hourly pay rate, $12.45. Is it another way to use, right?
I understand what you're saying. I think let's just double check. But I do understand what you're saying. 500 divided by
500 divided by 40.
I think what they're trying to, because you could do that, but when it becomes that method won't work is, let's say you're dealing with a monthly, instead of giving you like a per week, let's say they give you the monthly salary or they give you the bi-weekly period. They want you to go through this process and basically put it in terms of per year and then hours worked per year. But for this problem, yes, your way would work.
But for some other special case, we can use my solution have to convert to the yearly, right?
Yeah, and when there's special cases, yes. This is just kind of building those habits for you, but you are correct. You've got it.
Yeah, because I did the discussion. I have the similar problem, and I get the 500 divided by 40 to get the hourly pay rate.
Exactly.
And that's fine, right, Professor?
So, I'm having a hard time.
So is it my way correct, Professor? 500 divided by 40 equal $12.5 per hour.
For this problem, that's correct.
Thank you, Professor.
Yep, no problem. Okay, that one. I'm hoping by 11 we can switch to practice problems. So let's get through these couple last slides. So example, James is paid $1,200 for a 32-hour work week. This week, James works 42 hours. What is James' overtime pay rate? What is his total pay for the week? So we've got $1,200, and that's 52 weeks in a year. So this is his annual salary. And notice, James is paid for a 32-hour work week. The 40-hour work week doesn't apply to him. So he's going to work a total of 32 times 52 weeks, 1,664 hours in a year. Divide that by his annual salary, and we've got his hourly rate. Again, multiply that by your 1.5, and you have your overtime rate. So how do we calculate his total pay? Well, he works his normal 32 hours at his normal rate, plus the extra 8 hours, again, at the normal rate, right? Because this is still under 40 hours. 32 plus 8 is still under 40. So multiply that by the regular rate. Only the extra 2 hours, right? He's working 42 hours. Those extra 2 hours get multiplied by that overtime rate. Okay, let's keep on going. So a couple of rules when we were talking about overtime. In 2022, the following employees are exempt from overtime, unless, kind of the big theme here, if the state laws are more favorable to the employee, the state law takes effect. But these types of employees are exempt from overtime. So executives, administrative personnel, professionals, computer-related employees, and outside sales persons. We also have something called this bright line test. Basically, we're saying that you're considered highly compensated if you make this much or more. Therefore, you're not entitled to overtime pay. That's basically what this rule is saying. Okay, so now we're kind of switching over into section 4, which was all about hiring employees, kind of the documentation that is needed. So employers must obtain from new hires several forms. Social security number, right? Let's say that there's an employee who doesn't have a social security number. They can still get one or by completing this form SS5. A form W4. This basically is the employer telling the employee telling the employer how much federal income tax withheld do I want, withheld from my paycheck. Because obviously there's this minimum amount, but you can also set aside more if you want, or less, depending on if you're claiming dependents. Age certificate, right? This is required from those within 2 years of the legal age, right? You basically need to cover your butt and make sure, yeah, they are within legal age, they can work, right? We have child labor laws for a reason. And this one will just state tax exemption certificate. When your state has reciprocal agreements with neighboring states. That one, not too important, at least for right now. Let's just jump into the main stuff. Form I-9, for those that have worked or are currently working, potentially you remember filling out your I-9, right? Section 1 is completed by the employee. You're basically giving them all your basic information, date of birth, social security number. You basically are signing that you're legally able to work in the US. The Section 2, that's reviewed and signed by the employer, right? The whole part of Section 2 is that the employee's identity and authorization to work in the US has been confirmed. So to verify this, you examine, I guess I should pull up, but do they have it on here? Let's see if I can. I think I have it in, if I'm not mistaken, I thought I put it on here. Let me minimize this for a second. Yeah, this is what and this is linked, so you guys have access to this as well. basically this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the I-9, right? You can either choose one item from list A. Basically, these are documents that establish both identity and employment authorization, or you can choose one item from list B and one item from C. So it's typically easier just to bring in a document from list A. You only need one. Otherwise, you got to bring in two. So list A, both identity and employment. List B, only identity, and C is only employment authorization. So here are some examples. Typically, passport is usually the easiest to bring in. You can also do resident card. Yeah, those are typically what gets brought in. Let's look at what's brought in for list B documents. This is your identity. Main one is driver's license. Typically. You can also have these as well, right? School ID with a photograph, military card, anything of that sort. And let's see, this is your eligibility to work, or you're allowed to work here. Social security card, report of birth abroad, different forms. So just important to know that this exists. Let's jump back to that PowerPoint. Okay, so that's all of those lists. I'm not going to go through that. It's basically what we just looked at, and you've got that website linked for you. I believe that is all we want to, and it's perfect, right on time. That's all we really need to cover for section 3 and 4. So the next thing I want to do, we're going to start going over some practice problems. Hopefully this is a little bit more interactive for you guys. So let's jump down to section 3. I'm going to talk through this first one together. And then 2, 3, and 4. Let's see how many people we have in here, at least to start. I'm trying to figure out. Okay. So I'm going to put you guys into 3 breakout rooms after we do the first problem. The first breakout, if you're assigned to breakout room 1, you're going to do problem number 2. If you're assigned to breakout room 2, you're going to do problem number 3. And if you're assigned to breakout room 3, you're going to do problem number 4. So hopefully that makes sense. But let's look at this one together. I'm just going to pop this open so you guys can read along with me. So that was all from last week. And now we are on section 3. Okay, so let's read through this problem together. MADCO's policy is to deduct 1 hour of pay when an employee punches in 5 or more minutes late, right? And potentially they have this policy to try to motivate employees to show up on time. So 1 week in April, employee Bob, who is paid $7.25 an hour, remember this is the federal minimum wage, he punches in 5 minutes late one day and 10 minutes late another. But he's on time the other 3 days. He finally gets his stuff together. He's on time the other 3 days. Bob works 40 hours that week, and MADCO is going to dock him 3 hours of pay, right? Because he was late 5 minutes, and then he was late additional 10 minutes. So that's basically he was 5 minutes late 3 times. So that's 3 hours of pay. How much must the employee pay Bob for the week? So Bob actually worked 40 hours during the week, but MADCO intends to pay him only this amount, right? They want to pay him for only 37 hours of work because he was 5 minutes late. Because this is less than the federal minimum wage, right? He's entitled to $290. They want to pay him less. His employer is not allowed to dock his pay. Otherwise, it would be pushing him underneath the federal minimum wage threshold. So even though this is company policy, by federal law, they're not allowed to do this. Does everyone Feel okay with that one? Hopefully makes sense. Okay, awesome. So let me stop sharing my screen. I guess let's show. So we have problem 2, problem 3, and problem 4. So if you're assigned to breakout room 1, you're doing problem number 2. If you're assigned to breakout room number 2, you're doing 3. And if you're assigned to breakout room 3, you're doing number 4. So let me put you guys in breakout rooms. And I want you guys to go through these. They might take you a little bit of time. So I'm going to give you until 11:15 to talk this through with your group. And I'll let you guys know when you need to come back in the room. Okay, so we've got everybody back. I'm just going to ask, hopefully someone from your group, you guys can decide right now, for you guys to explain your solution. So number 2, room 1, we had Chris S. Edith, is Stephanie you like to go by, correct? I think that's what you told me the first day. Jared, Jonathan, John, and Mark. So if one of you guys wants to kind of speak up, what was your answer for 2, or how do you want to explain your solution?
For 2A?
2A, yeah.
Yeah. So he gets his 40 hours regular pay, and then 10 hours of OT, because he does the 4 hours for traveling and the extra 6 hours for that 40-hour week pay.
Okay, so you guys went into even a little bit more detail. So I'm going to share this, and I guess for the people that didn't answer number 2, go ahead and read the problem right now, just so you're familiar with it. I guess I can read it. You have it in front of you. I should be able to read that. So I'm going to share this just so everyone can kind of follow along. So it says, on Monday and Thursday, Plumbing Inc. employee Ramon drives home in the company van so that he can respond to an emergency calls. He works 46 hours for the work week, including 4 hours travel time from his home to emergency calls. He should be paid for 46 hours in the work week, including 6 hours of overtime. An employee who's on 24-hour call and takes home a company vehicle to be available for emergencies must be paid for travel time between home and job site when responding to such emergencies. So I think you guys, what did you say? You said only 4 hours of overtime. Is that correct?
Well, I said he had a 40-hour work week and then 6 hours additional of OT and then the extra 4, so that makes 10 hours of OT.
Got it. So for this, so the taking the car home doesn't necessarily mean, let's read through this again. So he's going to be paid in total for 46 hours. He worked 46 hours. That includes, I think that's the big thing, that 46 includes the 4 hours of travel. So I think you guys
includes it.
Yeah.
It's not an additional.
Not additional. That's okay.
So it should be the 4 hours. We thought it was just like, his regular was 40, then he has an additional 6 plus the other 4, that makes 10.
I understand. Yeah, I can understand your logic. And that's really the terminal. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say misleading, but you have to really read
I get the wording. Yeah.
It's the wording. Yeah. But you guys you understand the concepts underlying
yes.
it. Yeah. So you're fine. Let's try B. So Grace's 40-hour work week is Monday to Friday. On Sunday, she eats a bad clam, so she stays home on Monday and works half a day on Tuesday, for which she is paid 12-hour sick leave. On Friday, she works an extra 3 hours. And I know I've got the answer up here, but hopefully we can all go through it together. Grace should be paid for 43 hours, right? It's the 12-hour sick time that she got, right? She stayed home Monday, that's 8 hours, and then half of Tuesday, that's 4 hours. So there's her 12 hours of 6. And then she actually worked, the 31 hours Tuesday to Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, no overtime pay is required because her actual hours worked are 31, and that's not greater than 40.
Correct.
Is that what you guys had for group 1?
Yes, 31
Perfect.
Regular, 12 sick, so regular pay, no OT.
Perfect. Awesome. And then last one. On Friday, Harold, who normally works a 40-hour Monday to Friday work week, leaves early to pick up his daughter, having worked 37 hours for the week. The following week, he works 43 hours. For that first week, he's only going to get paid for 37, and the second
37.
week, 43. There's no swapping.
Yeah.
And you guys got that one. Perfect. Okay, so
Yes.
group one, you guys did well. Group two, this was Alex, Brianna, Courtney, Fernando, Kulan, Lena. Do you guys want to walk us through? Oops, I'm kind of showing the answer, trying to hide it. Walk us through your logic.
Okay. So for A, Ryan is normally paid $1,000 for a 40-hour work week. 1 week he works 46 hours, so he has 6 hours of OT. So we took 1,000 divided by 40.
Okay.
Is $25 per hour times 1.5 is 37.5 times 6 is 225, and then we added that to 1,000, so it's 1,225.
Perfect. Yep, you guys got that one perfectly. Nice job. I'm trying to hide it and just, there we go. Derek is normally paid $414 for a 36-hour work week. 1 week he works 40 hours. How much does he get paid? What do you guys think?
So we took 400. So he doesn't get OT for this because it's not over 40. So it's just 414 divided by 36, and then multiply that by 40. So that's 460.
So let's go through this one. I would say is one of the trickier ones. Let me close this really fast. So this is, I think, the trickiest question on this section. So 414 divided by 36, we have our hourly pay rate times 1.5. That would be I'm sorry. No. You did this correctly. This is just giving extra information. I'm thinking of a different problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are fine. This is, I'm in the future. You guys did this one correctly. Good job. There is something, so gross wages remain at 414 for the week under this Klinger offer rule. And I did link, let me find, if you want to go open up the outline, there's an additional link for section 3, which kind of talks about this. Derek need not be compensated for up to 40 hours in the work week. However, had he worked more than 40, then he would be due regular pay for hours 37 to 40. And then he would get 1.5 times for hours in excess of 40. So I apologize for the confusion. You guys did that one correctly. And then what do you guys think for part C?
Wait, so he doesn't get paid for the 4 hours extra?
No, he does not.
Okay.
So basically you are only entitled overtime for over 40.
But not even normal pay?
No, so that's the whole idea with this Klinger-Hoffer rule. So basically, he still gets
Is it because he's salary?
It's not so much because he's salaried. So basically, right, he's gonna have his normal pay of.
Professor, we follow the federal wage hour law. That means 40 hours per week, right? Every hour that earn over 40 hours per week, so it consider OT pay, even though there is the 36-hour work week.
So he should be paid for
40, but not OT.
Yeah, not overtime.
OT.
So had he worked 41 hours, he would have gotten 1 hour at this rate. But he only worked 40. So he's going to get 40 times his normal hourly pay rate.
Which
Yes.
is 11.
Okay, so he does get paid the
$460.
extra 4 hours.
Yeah, the way that this is written is a bit confusing.
But it
So
says it doesn't need to be compensated up to 40. What?
Just get the extra understand how it works for the OT pay. We don't use it.
yeah, so basically, had he worked 41 hours, he would have gotten 1 hour at this rate.
Yeah. And another 1 hour additional for the OT for the 1.5 minus the normal hourly pay rate.
Yeah, you know what? I'll do some extra. I'll write up a little thing for this problem and then write it out. I don't like the way that this is written out. I think it's a bit misleading. And then I'll post an announcement so we have a very detailed, correct answer on this.
Yeah.
Okay with
And
everybody.
Professor, and the question C is similar to the question B, like we have discussed, even though the 30-hour work week, but we follow the furlough law, so they only 40 hours multiplied by the normally hour wage rate, right?
So Lisa normally is paid $900 for a 30-hour work week. 1 week she works 40 hours.
Oh, I see. I get it.
So 900 divided by 30 is your 30. That's how much she's getting paid per hour.
Yeah. And multiplied by 40 hours, we get 1,200 per week.
Oh, so no matter how many hours she works, she'll always only earn $900.
If it's less than 40.
Oh.
If it was more than 40, then overtime is going to kick in. But this one I think is written a little bit clear. I'm going to write up a little detailed thing so you guys have step by step the logic on these two. But just for the sake of time, is it okay if we keep going?
I'm confused. So
I'm
she
confused.
worked 40 hours, but she's only getting paid for 30?
Yeah. So for this one, I don't like this explanation. I'm going to write up a separate thing and post it.
Okay.
Just
Okay,
for
thank
you
you.
guys. Yeah, because I can see where this terminology is a bit, basically, we need to look up this Klinghoffer rule, which I have a little thing posted on the outline, but I want to make sure it's a little bit more nice and neat and organized for you guys. So after class, I'll post a little thing on these part B and C for number 3.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, just for the sake of time, I want to make sure we don't get too far behind. Who solved number 4? This was Jessica, Junie, Longkun. We have a couple of people. Oh, that's old. Okay, Laura. And then do I pronounce Monia? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What did you guys, well, I'm gonna sneak peek the answer here. Let's walk through this together. We'll just put 4 all up there. And let me know if you guys did this or you guys had different logic. So compute gross wages due to each employee under federal wage hour law. Letitia is normally paid $1,200 for a 40-hour work week. On Monday, she is out sick, but she receives 8 hours of sick pay. She then works 40 hours Tuesday to Friday. So her normal hourly pay rate, right? $1,200 for a 40-hour work week, that's $30 an hour. She is going to be paid that 48 times 30. However, no overtime pay is actually paid because the actual hours worked do not exceed 40.
Yes, that's what we got.
You did? Okay, awesome. And let's try this next one. Al is normally paid $500 for a 40-hour work week. 1 week, he works 45 hours. So his normal typical pay rate is 500 divided by 40. Multiply that by your 1.5 to get our overtime rate. So his normal pay or his total pay for the week is 40 hours times the normal rate plus the extra 5 hours at the overtime rate. Did you guys get this one?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. And let's try part C. Lee is normally paid $1,500 for a 40-hour work week. To make up for leaving early one Friday, he works 44 hours this week. So his normal rate is at $1,500 divided by 40 hours. To get his premium rate, we multiply it by 1.5. So we have 40 hours at his typical rate, plus the extra 4 hours at the overtime rate.
Yes, that's what we got also.
Perfect. Okay. So let's jump down to section 4, and then if we have time, we can jump back up to problems 3, B, and C. Section 4, I'm not going to even put you guys in breakout rooms for this next section. I'm just going to show you the answers. We're going to read through them. This is more kind of, I don't even know how to classify, like just regulations, rules. So there's not really any application involved. What 4 documents must employers collect at the time of hiring or obtain from the employee after hiring? Social Security card, W-4, age certificate if you're, a minor, and then I-9. Hopefully that one's pretty straightforward. What is the purpose of Form I-9? We didn't entirely, directly talk about this. The I-9 came about under Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. Basically, they want to make sure that employees are documented and able to work, authorized to work in the United States. That is why the I-9 came about. That's some little history about it. Which documents provide both an employee's proof of identity and authorization to work in the United States, right? These are all the documents that would fall under List A. Big kind of main one is the passport. Which documents provide proof of identity, but not authorization to work? This is going to be on List B. Big one is driver's license or military card, anything of that sort. And then 5, which documents substantiate an employee's authorization to work in the United States, but not proof of identity? These are items on List C. So Social Security card, birth certificate, anything of that sort. This we did not really, question 6, we didn't really hit this one in the PowerPoint, but I did detail it on the outline. So be sure to read the outline. But on August 3rd, 2021, Becky completes a W-4. On February 12th, 2022, she submits a new W-4 claiming 3 additional exemptions. Until what date must Becky's employer retain each of Becky's W-4s? And it's on page, let me open up the book if you guys have yours next to you. There's one page in here, I wrote it down. Let's see. We're in section 4. If you go to page 59 in your textbook, it tells you exactly how long employers are required by law to retain these documents. Even though that these are the minimum requirements, it's actually suggested that employers hang on to these documents for 15 years. Thankfully now everything is trying to move into this electronical space, so you don't have to take up that much physical space, but important to know these years. So Becky's August 3rd, 2021 W-4 must be retained until April 15th, 2026. This is 4 years after those taxes are due, right? So 2021, that return is going to get filed April 15th of 2022. From that date, from 4 years after that date, that's how long it needs to be retained at the minimum. That's why we have April 15th, 2026. Her W-4 dated February 12th, 2022. It is retained until April 15th, 2027, or April 15th following the year of her termination, whichever is later. Key thing here is that you need to, at the minimum, hold these specific documents for, it looks like if you go to page 59, 4 to 3 years. However, even though these are the minimum requirements, it's suggested to hang on to these documents for 15 years. Okay, and this number 7 is really going through these retention dates. So until what date must an employee retain the following documents? W-2s issued to employees for 2022. W-2 should be retained for 4 years, starting on April 15th of the year subsequent to the tax year to which the document applies. Thus, these W-2s should be retained until April 15th, 2027. What about B? A 2021 Form 90, Form 940 filed on February 1st, 2022. The filing due date is January 31st, therefore 2026, that's 4 years. A former employee's 2020 W-2 that has been returned as undeliverable. The IRS that requires that a returned W-2 be retained for 4 years from April 15th following the tax year to which the document pertains. Thus, the employer should retain this returned W-2 until April 15th, 2025. Got a couple more of these. A W-4 submitted March 6, 2021. Although the federal wage and hour law requires employers to retain W-4s for only 3 years, the IRS requires keeping them for 4 years from April 15th following the tax year to which they pertain. Therefore, we've got until April 15th, 2026. A lot of these are just kind of repeats. Employment applications. Federal wage and hour law says 3 years. IRS, though, they say 4 years from April 15th, following the tax year to which the document pertains. Let's do F. A cancel check remitting payroll taxes. Although federal wage and hour laws require employers to retain cancel checks for 3 years, the IRS requires that they be retained for 4 years from April 15th, following the tax year to which they pertain. Hopefully you can kind of see the pattern. I-9, 3 years from the date of hire or 1 year from the date of termination, whichever is later. So for this one, it should be retained until December 4th, 2022. An I-9 for an employee hired March 11th, 2021 and fired November 11th, 2022. I-9s must be retained for 3 years from the date of hire or 1 year from the date of termination, whichever is later. Thus, the employer should retain this until March 11th, 2024. Okay, so I know there's a lot of information here. Really, I just want you to understand, and this is going to be posted. So, if you need to go back and review the answers, you can pause the video or, go ahead and take a screenshot right now. But really, all kind of overview of what's happening in problem number 7 is we're looking at page 59. And even though the wage and hour laws might say, hey, you only need this for 3 years, the IRS is really saying, no, you need to keep it for 4 years. And on that April 5th, the subsequent year of the April 15th tax deadline. That's really the takeaway.
So follow IRS rules.
Sorry, say it one more time.
So we follow the IRS timeline pretty much.
Exactly. Anytime there's like a more strict requirement, you want to follow that. Even I think that the textbook talks about, even though we have all these rules, they actually suggest 15 years.
Okay.
So
out of curiosity, do you know why that W-4 was changed in the last few years from IRS?
Like the format of it?
Yes.
That had to do with tax reform. And honestly, there's just always so many little changes going on. Probably
no one really knows.
Yeah, no one really knows.
I think.
But supposedly some people think it's more simple. Other people are like, no, I understood this other way, leave it alone.
Yeah.
There's no way to ever please anyone.
Right.
But I don't know, what's your opinion? Do you like the old one or the new one?
I mean, I could do either or, but I know for most people, the old one was much, much easier.
Much easier, yeah. Especially too, it's like once you get into the habit of it. But with tax reform, usually there's going to be subsequent changes with the other related forms.
Okay.
So let's just jump back to this. We've got a little bit of time. Trying to think of a good way to go over this.
Excuse me, Professor, may I ask you one question about?
Oh, go for it.
The last question, the section 4, question 7. How do we know it's required by the IRS, but not the EEOC or immigration or wage and hour law? Because based on the question, the question is simple. It doesn't say the IRS or something else.
I see what you're saying. Well,
question 7.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have your textbook open, but go to page 59.
Yeah. When I look at the table, so I'm a little confused. I need more understand to get help from your that, you know, this based on the, if we look at the table, we choose the column under IRS. Why we don't choose all the column?
So let's just look at one. So let's look at the row for I-9. Okay, because that's the question I think you were kind of hinting at for part G. Right?
Huh?
So
I mean, how do we know it's required by IRS, but not others, Professor?
well, like I don't know if this will work. I'm gonna try to stop sharing my screen for a second. Let's see if this will work. I don't know if you guys are able to see this very well, but if you go to this page and look at the I-9 row,
Yeah.
it tells you, right? The IRS has no requirement for how long you need to retain your I-9. The wage and hour, federal wage and hour laws, no requirement. EEOC, no requirement. But for immigration, it's 3 years. So that's how, right? If everything else is 0, but then you have a requirement for 3 years, then you better keep it for 3 years. Does that make sense?
Oh. Okay.
Right.
And then just a good rule of thumb, right? Even though we only have 4, 3, however many years, they're still suggesting you to keep it for 15 years, even though it's not a requirement, but you should. It's almost like a suggested requirement. Does that answer your question?
So for example, if we look at the table for the firm W4H, there are 2 columns under IRS and wage and hour. Which one should we choose if the question doesn't say that it's required by IRS or the law of wage and hours profession?
Then I would choose the one that's greater.
Oh, greater, yes. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor.
That answers it?
Yeah, I got
Awesome.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's go back. Not that. We've got a little bit of time, so let's try to dive into this one. I'm trying to think of a good way to go back to this one. And we can pull up that Klinghoffer rule. Okay, so I think this is probably the best way to explain it. So let's just look at 3C. So Lisa normally is paid $900 for a 30-hour work week. 1 week she works 40 hours. So that would have been her normal hourly rate was 30 hours, $30 per hour.
Yes.
Had she worked 40 hours a week.
So we get $1,200 per week on this question.
Yeah. So I can see where this one is confused. Lisa need not be paid for the hours worked between 31 and 40 in the work week because her regular rate of pay exceeds $7.25 per hour. So because this is already greater than $7.25, right? They're saying basically that this $900 is going to stay. That's what these two I think are the most confusing. I'm going to pull up this outline though.
So for Lisa's the extra 10 hours, she's just basically working for free.
That's kind of what it sounds like. And it's because of these Klinghoffer rules. Yep, here it is. So basically this Klinghoffer rule is saying, basically you're making above minimum wage, right? You don't need to be compensated for up to 40 hours. If you're making
that's on the federal level, because if you were in a different state, let's say like here, California, you'll get paid for your 40 hours.
Yes, and state laws definitely, like if a state is more, whatever state laws that are more favorable to the employee, that's going to take effect. But let's say going back up to B, had he worked 41 hours, then he would have gotten this overtime rate.
So, Professor, even though the the hourly pay, normally our pay rate is more than the medium wage, it's bigger 7.25. So he still have the overtime pay.
So if he worked 41 hours, then this would have kicked in for that last extra hour. I think this explanation, it might actually be an okay explanation. Let's dive through this one. So Derek is normally paid $414 for a 36-hour work week. 1 week he works 40 hours. So his normal rate of pay, right, 414 divided by 36 is $11.50. Note that that's greater than the federal minimum wage. If he were to earn overtime, it would be 1.5 that amount. Hopefully everyone's good with that first line. Should be straightforward. However, for this problem, his gross wage is going to remain at $414 for the week, even though he worked 40 hours. So the reason for this is because of this Klinghoffer rule. Derek does not need to be compensated for up to 40 hours in the work week. This is this Klinghoffer rule, and it's called the Klinghoffer rule because of this. Let's see if I can minimize this. Because of this court case. Let me pull it up, the link that I had found on it. You'll hear Klinghoffer rule or gap time. So what is gap time? What is the Klinghoffer rule? So if you are one of those workers who has left a job and been paid your last check at the minimum wage instead of your regular hourly rate, it's legal. That's what this is basically saying. They don't have to pay you at your regular hourly rate. In 1965, an employer filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Labor, the DOL. The idea behind the lawsuit was that the DOL did not have the authority to force that employer or any other employer to pay more than the minimum wage, regardless of what the employer agreed to pay and regardless of how much the employer had actually paid. So this is just talking about the court case. I'll let you guys read through this, but basically that's why these last two problems are so tricky. Up to 40, not entitled. However, had he worked more than 40 hours, he would be due regular pay for hours 37 through 40. Then he would have gotten regular pay at this amount for hours 37 to 40. And anything above 40, had he worked 41 hours, then all of those hours above 40 would have been at this overtime rate.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Does that, is there anything in California that like supersedes the Klinghoffer rule?
I believe California, I don't know their specific rules, but I do believe that yes, California is definitely more favorable to the employee.
So if this situation happened in California, they would potentially be required to pay that, say, hourly rate up to 40 hours?
I don't want to say yes without double checking. I don't want to give you wrong information, but I will, let me look it up. But I do believe California is, I don't think that this would take effect.
Yeah.
But before I give a straight answer, I want to double check.
Okay.
But
Thanks.
yeah, I apologize for all the workaround on this, but I think we finally got it. So
yeah, it's just confusing because usually I've seen this for salary. Doesn't matter how many hours you work, you'll get paid your salary.
right, yeah, overtime doesn't even come into play.
Right.
Was there another
Professor, I remember I read about the California law that it's more favorable to the employee that anyone work over 8 hours per day, so can get the OT pay.
That is correct. And I think, yes. So in California, I know that if you work more than 8 hours a day, then you are entitled to overtime in California. That's 100% true. I'm just not sure about it in terms of in accumulation, the total hours of pay. But I have to imagine if they do it on a per day level, then I don't think that this would come into play in California. Does anyone have experience with this, or does anyone by chance know?
This is the first time I hear about this rule. That's why I was like, huh?
Yeah, I think in California, we're in definitely a state that favors the employee. But
Yeah,
good to know
we're
that.
kind of sheltered.
Yeah, which is good. I'm fine with that.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, me too.
So like in any other states, would it still apply if the state minimum wage is over over
The 725,
yeah.
then
That
the state minimum wage will come into play.
Oh,
That's a
okay.
good question.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, hopefully, and if you guys are still confused on B and C, just send me an email. We can walk through it. But I will look up how does this Klingerhofer rule impact Californians? My gut is telling me I don't think California would be okay with this, but before I say anything, I want to do my research. But if there aren't any other questions, you guys get an extra 4 minutes in your day. If you do have any questions, feel free to stay on Zoom and we can talk them through.
Professor, I have one more question about that. I just say about California. If the California have more favorable